The golden glow of the Sands Hotel's Copa Room cast warm shadows across velvet-covered tables as Frank Sinatra commanded the stage like an emperor surveying his kingdom. March 15, 1975. Al Pacino sat at a corner table, nursing a scotch and observing the carefully orchestrated theater of Las Vegas royalty in its prime. At 35, he'd just completed filming Dog Day Afternoon, and had come to Vegas at the invitation of a studio executive who insisted that meeting Sinatra was essential for any serious actor's education in entertainment history. But in this temple of smooth sophistication, surrounded by men whose power came from charm rather than craft, Al felt like an intruder studying a world where authenticity took second place to style. But what happened in the next 45 minutes would prove that some confrontations create legends that outlast the stages where they occur. The Copa Room was the Vatican of American entertainment, a sacred space where the biggest names in show business came not just to perform, but to be anointed by the approval of their peers. Frank Sinatra didn't just headline here, he owned it, ruled it, defined what it meant to be truly successful in the entertainment industry. When Sinatra took the microphone, conversations stopped, drinks were forgotten, and even the most powerful men in the room became audience members. Al had been watching the performance for an hour, studying not just Sinatra's legendary vocal technique but his complete mastery of crowd control. Every gesture was calculated, every pause precisely timed, every interaction with the audience designed to reinforce his status as chairman of the entertainment board. This wasn't just singing. This was the exercise of cultural authority on a level that most performers never approached. But beneath the smooth surface of the performance, Al sensed something else, a calculated exclusivity that separated the Vegas royalty from everyone else. The Copa Room wasn't just an entertainment venue, it was a club where membership required not just talent, but the right kind of talent, the right approach to fame, the right understanding of what entertainment was supposed to accomplish. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sinatra announced from the stage, his voice carrying the effortless authority that had commanded rooms for 3 decades, "we've got some special guests with us tonight. Hollywood royalty mixing with Vegas royalty. 2 different worlds coming together." The spotlight swept across the room, briefly illuminating tables filled with studio executives, casino owners, and entertainment legends who'd built their careers on making audiences forget their troubles rather than confronting them with difficult truths. "But you know," Sinatra continued, his tone shifting slightly towards something more pointed, "there's entertainment that lifts people up, and there's, what do they call it, serious acting that brings people down." Several guests exchanged glances, recognizing that Sinatra was building toward one of his famous observations about the state of modern entertainment. When the chairman had opinions to share, everyone listened. Al remained perfectly still at his corner table, his breathing controlled, but something about Sinatra's direction was beginning to feel deliberately targeted. "See, we believe in giving audiences what they want," Sinatra said, his voice gaining confidence as he warmed to his theme. "Romance, excitement, escape from the daily grind. We don't believe in making them work to understand what we're trying to say." The implicit criticism was becoming clearer. Sinatra was drawing a line between his generation of entertainers and the method actors who'd revolutionized Hollywood with their commitment to psychological realism over audience comfort. "Entertainment should entertain," Sinatra declared, his voice carrying across the Copa Room like a musical proclamation. "Not educate, not challenge, not make people think too hard about things they came here to forget." Al's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he recognized that this wasn't just general commentary, it was a philosophical attack on everything he'd spent his career building. That's when Sinatra did something that made the entire Copa Room hold its breath. He stepped down from the stage and began walking directly toward Al's table. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sinatra announced, his voice carrying across the silent room, "we've got one of these serious actors with us tonight. Al Pacino. You know, the guy from those heavy, depressing movies that make you want to slit your wrists." Nervous laughter rippled through the audience as every eye in the Copa Room focused on Al's table. This was unprecedented. Sinatra never abandoned his stage during a performance unless he had something important to demonstrate. "Al Pacino," Sinatra said, stopping directly beside the corner table, his presence commanding attention from every person in the room. The method actor. The guy who thinks entertainment should be work. The challenge was unmistakable, delivered with Sinatra's trademark smooth confidence but carrying an edge that made it clear this wasn't friendly banter. "Frank," Al said quietly, standing respectfully as Vegas protocol demanded when the chairman addressed you directly. "You know what I don't understand, Al?" Sinatra said, his voice projecting easily to every corner of the Copa Room. "Why you serious actors think audiences want to watch people suffer. Why you think entertainment should be painful." Al remained silent, understanding that interrupting Frank Sinatra in his own room would be both professionally and socially suicidal. "See, we come from different worlds," Sinatra continued, beginning to circle Al's table like a master performer working a particularly important bit. "I come from the world where entertainment means making people feel better than they did when they walked in. You come from the world where entertainment means making people think about things they'd rather avoid." The Copa Room was dead silent now, every guest understanding that they were witnessing something unprecedented in Vegas entertainment history. "And honestly," Sinatra said, his voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a final judgment, "I don't think you belong here. This isn't your world, Al. This is about joy, about escape, about giving people what they want instead of what you think they need." The words hung in the air like smoke from expensive cigars. Frank Sinatra had just publicly dismissed Al Pacino in front of Las Vegas royalty, questioning not just his approach to entertainment but his right to exist in the same professional universe. When Al finally responded, his words would create a moment that would be retold in entertainment circles for the next 50 years. When Al finally responded, his words would create a moment that would be retold in entertainment circles for the next 50 years. The silence in the Copa Room stretched beyond what audiences were accustomed to experiencing during Sinatra's performances. Al stood perfectly still beside his corner table, his dark eyes focused on Frank's weathered face with an intensity that seemed to make every crystal chandelier and velvet curtain in the room fade into background. When he finally broke his silence, his voice carried a quality that made every entertainment legend present lean forward despite themselves. "Frank," Al said quietly, his voice carrying the controlled power that had made him famous, "you want to know what doesn't belong here?" Sinatra nodded confidently, perhaps expecting a defensive explanation about the importance of serious acting or a respectful acknowledgement of different entertainment philosophies. "What doesn't belong here," Al said, his voice taking on the passionate intensity that had defined his greatest performances, "is the idea that entertainment and truth have to be enemies. That making people feel good requires lying to them about what life actually costs." The Copa Room remained silent, but the energy had shifted completely. Every guest understood that Al's response was heading somewhere none of them had anticipated. "You talk about escape, Frank," Al continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. "But let me tell you what real escape looks like. Real escape is when someone watches Michael Corleone and finally understands why they've been making the same self-destructive choices their father made." Sinatra's confident expression began to flicker, perhaps sensing that this wasn't the deferential response he'd expected from someone he'd just publicly challenged in his own territory. "You think Serpico was depressing?" Al asked, his voice taking on an edge that made everyone in the Copa Room suddenly more alert. 3 months ago, I got a letter from a police officer in Chicago who said watching that film convinced him to report corruption in his department. Said it almost cost him his job, but it saved his integrity." Al stepped closer to Sinatra, his movement controlled but carrying an undercurrent of building energy that made several Vegas legends shift uncomfortably in their velvet chairs. "That's not depression, Frank," Al said, his voice building with controlled intensity. "That's transformation. That's entertainment that doesn't just make people feel better for 2 hours, it makes them better human beings for the rest of their lives." The devastation was building systematically, but Al was just getting started. "You want to know what doesn't belong in entertainment?" Al continued, his voice gaining power. "The assumption that audiences are too weak, too fragile, too stupid to handle authentic human experience. The belief that escapism requires infantilizing grown adults who are capable of facing truth if someone's brave enough to show it to them. Sinatra remained perfectly still, his legendary command of every room apparently ineffective against someone operating on a psychological level he'd never encountered. "When I prepared to play Michael Corleone," Al said, his voice taking on the passionate conviction that had made him legendary, "I didn't just put on a suit and practice looking tough. I spent 2 years learning what it costs a good man to become a monster for his family. I explored psychological territory so dark, so morally complex, that I had nightmares for months afterward." Al looked directly into Sinatra's pale blue eyes, his gaze carrying the kind of focused intensity that had made him one of the most compelling performers of his generation. "But you know what I found in that darkness, Frank?" Al asked, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper but somehow carrying more power than any shout. "I found light. I found understanding. I found the kind of human truth that actually sets people free instead of just distracting them from their chains." The silence in the Copa Room was profound and transformative. Every entertainment legend present understood they were witnessing something unprecedented, someone challenging Frank Sinatra's authority in his own domain, not through disrespect but through demonstration of a completely different understanding of what entertainment could accomplish. "You built your career on making people forget their troubles," Al said, his voice taking on a new quality that commanded absolute attention from every person in the room. "I built mine on helping them understand their troubles well enough to overcome them." Sinatra's legendary composure was showing cracks as Al continued his systematic demonstration of why authentic art required more courage than smooth entertainment ever could. "And you want to know what's funny?" Al continued, his voice building towards something that would fundamentally challenge Sinatra's entire worldview. "The audiences you think are too weak to handle truth? They're hungry for it. Starving for it. They've been fed so much artificial sweetness, so much manufactured escape, that when someone finally shows them authentic human experience, they respond like people discovering water in a desert." Al straightened his jacket with deliberate dignity, his movement controlled and purposeful. "So when you say I don't belong here, Frank," Al said, delivering what would become the most quoted response in Vegas entertainment history, "you're right. I don't belong in a world that confuses comfort with entertainment, that mistakes avoidance for enjoyment, that believes audiences deserve to be protected from the very experiences that could transform their lives." The silence that followed was electric and uncomfortable. Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the board, the man who'd ruled American entertainment for 3 decades, stood speechless as Al continued his education in what authentic artistry actually required. "But here's what you're missing," Al said, his voice returning to respectful tones while maintaining its underlying steel. "The world is changing, Frank. Audiences are evolving. They don't just want to escape from their lives anymore, they want to understand them, improve them, transform them." Al looked around the Copa Room, taking in faces that included some of the most powerful people in American entertainment, all of them watching with fascination as he systematically redefined what success meant. "And the entertainers who survive that change," Al continued, his voice gaining strength, "won't be the ones who gave audiences what they wanted. They'll be the ones who gave audiences what they needed, even when they didn't know they needed it." Sinatra remained motionless for nearly 30 seconds, his pale eyes showing something that Copa Room regulars had never seen before, genuine uncertainty about his own understanding of entertainment and its purpose. "You know what, kid?" Sinatra said finally, his voice carrying none of its earlier dismissal, "Maybe I've been looking at this all wrong." Al extended his hand respectfully, his gesture carrying neither triumph nor submission but recognition of a philosophical difference that could coexist with mutual respect. "Frank, what you built in this room is incredible," Al replied, shaking Sinatra's hand firmly. "The joy, the escape, the pure entertainment value, that takes real talent and real courage. But maybe there's room in this business for different kinds of courage." The handshake lasted several seconds, everyone present understanding that they'd witnessed something unprecedented, not the defeat of one approach by another, but the recognition that entertainment could exist in forms that neither generation had fully understood. "You know what?" Sinatra said, his voice thoughtful rather than challenging, "I'd like to understand what you do." How you turn pain into something people want to watch. And I'd like to learn what you do, Al replied, how you turn joy into something people remember forever. Word of the confrontation spread through Las Vegas within hours, not as gossip about a celebrity argument, but as a lesson in how different approaches to entertainment could challenge and strengthen each other rather than simply competing for dominance. Sinatra never again made dismissive comments about method acting, and privately told friends that his encounter with Al Pacino had taught him that there were forms of entertainment courage he'd never considered, and that Vegas was big enough for performers who made people think as well as those who helped them forget. The story became legend among both traditional entertainers and serious actors, cited as proof that authentic artistry could exist in multiple forms simultaneously, and that the greatest performers were those who respected the courage required for approaches different from their own. Al continued to visit Vegas regularly, but the dynamic had shifted completely. The entertainment legends who'd initially viewed him as an outsider now watched his work with genuine respect, understanding that his exploration of human darkness required the same kind of professional courage they brought to making audiences feel joy, just applied to completely different emotional territory.